Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Each week, I invite you to sit in on a conversation with a new guest where we get level, bringing you real people, real issues, and real conversations. My hope is you walk away from the show inspired and equipped to level up in your own life and leadership. If you'd like a copy of the best of notes and quotes from each show, please subscribe to my email list at louisehreed.com. Finally, I love to give away exclusive Lady Boss loyalty swag as a way of saying thank you to you for spending your time with me. So to get your hands on some of this, simply comment on a podcast episode with the hashtag LadyBossLoyalty and you'll be automatically entered into the draw. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to today's fantastic and very special guest. I'm going to share a little bit with you about this wonderful woman, Joanna Garzilli, and then we'll just jump right on into the conversation. So Joanna Garzilli is an award-winning Harper Collins author of Big Miracles, the 11 Spiritual Rules for Ultimate Success. And she's been captivating audiences for over 20 years and certainly has captured my heart, whether through her highly successful spiritual coaching business, her keynote speaking, or through personal readings for entrepreneurs and celebrities alike. Joanna has been featured all over the world, including BBC News, BBC Radio, Fox News, Entrepreneur, Daily Mail, The Sun, and Independent, just to name a few. With 2 other extremely compelling books to her name, Joanna continually raises all those she touches to listen and work with their spirit, to navigate and reach fulfillment in their lives. Joanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Louise. And my heart is smiling as well as my face.
I can see it and I can feel it.
Because I adore you.
Oh, and that's so lovely. My regular listeners know of you. They have heard of you through my mentioning of the coaching work that I have been doing with you for a year and a bit. I was going to say for years. It feels like years. We talked about this earlier today.
Feels like years in a good way, right? Not, yes. Oh gosh, it's so many years.
Absolutely.
It's the connection, right?
It's the connection. It speaks to that. And so my regular listeners know that. Those who are new to the show, that's who Joanna is to me as a title. Certainly means more to me on a heart level. And Joanna's Big Miracles, her book, The 11 Spiritual Rules for Ultimate Success. If you're watching on YouTube, you see the book. This is the book that brought us together. And so I can't wait just to dig into all sorts of things, Joanna, learning about you. I want to jump into some Big Miracles stuff and just share your goodness and your heart with my listeners.
Wonderful.
Okay, so where do I start? I often start with a question I know you, a similar question that you would ask on life stories, and we can talk about life stories in a few minutes. But I do love to rewind the clock and understand what little Joanna wanted to be when she grew up. Because I'm sure you weren't thinking best-selling, an award-winning author, spiritual coach. I'm sure those weren't on your list of things you wanted to be.
I always loved entertainment industry. I loved TV and film from a very young age. And I remember my dad took a photo of me where I had turned a cardboard box into a television, and I would get inside the box and pretend I was on TV. So that was something that I did. The other thing was, and then later on how that manifested was from producing films and doing a lot of producing on TV, and then also being on TV and hosting and acting. So that came about. Also from a very young age, I was always asking, what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of existence? And so I suppose that manifested as doing the work that I do now within the realm of spirituality and intuition and metaphysics. So although I didn't specifically have that, I'm going to be this when I grow up, I think that probably what I wanted to be was Wonder Woman I really like Linda Carter and Wonder Woman.
And I think you are. And it's funny how, not funny, interesting, how all of these pieces, as you go through life and experience different things personally and professionally, all piece together to get you to where you are. And those visions of, perhaps visions of being in TV and wanting to be Wonder Woman, I think have come to fruition in very tangible ways and some less tangible. So help us understand then that journey that you took from those early days behind a cardboard box to the real life Joanna, producing her own show and being a host and interviewing tremendous number of guests of high quality and caliber in Hollywood. Walk us through a little bit about how that sort of unfolded.
So I think that our life is always showing up, giving us signs. And I always talk about the subtle energies around us and within us. So if I look at the track, I would say from an entertainment perspective, it would have been that I was always cast as the male lead in school plays because I was one of the tallest people in the class, and probably because I'm more of that naturally A-type personality. So I went to all girls school. And so, yeah, I was always cast as the king or the sultan or the pilot. It was always some type of figure like that. And fast forward then from hanging out with different friends of mine, some of them one of the schools right next to mine was Sylvia Young Stage School. So a number of my friends were regularly on TV, on major hit TV shows. So I was very much in that world. And back in those days, I was extremely social and just around a lot of people in the entertainment industry. So my opportunities, they came about in a very organic, natural way, where it really was through friendships. And I know we always hear that expression, your net worth is in your network, and we hear that so much, but it really is true. When I look at a lot of the time, how those things came about, they came about from someone that I knew. And I think that part of that is that one has to have the skills and have done the work. And so I was always training, educating myself, studying other people, having different mentors, guides, coaches in the areas that interested me, from acting to media to writing and intuitive metaphysical development.
One of the many things I find fascinating about you, especially when we first met, I still find it fascinating now, to be clear, was you were working in Hollywood and had such a deep spiritual connection. And when I first, like I said, introduced to you through your book, Big Miracles, I had always imagined those two things as being very distinctively, almost polarized. That's the story I sort of made up in my head about that. Before we sort of jump into that, because that's where I'd like to go, I'd maybe just share with us how you started on this more formal spiritual journey, and then how it led you to Hollywood.
So for me, living in alignment, I think it goes back to, when I say living in alignment, it starts with pain. And could I say something specific in my life that this certain person did a certain thing to me that caused pain? With the awareness I have at this point in my life, I feel it really does come to, and I know we resonate, both of us on this, is that it comes from the soul. And I feel that I personally believe that we live more than what our soul lives on, even though I still do have fear of death, but not as much. That's lessening. I'm getting more peaceful around that. So in terms of the soul, from a very young age, I felt a lot of fragmentation and heaviness there. Looking back, I understand a lot of that wasn't mine. I didn't understand that I was very empathetic. I had very strong, what I call within the sort of the psychic senses, is strong clairsentience and feeling other people's energy, highly sensitive. And so I would be feeling other people's energy, feeling their pain, even if they were hiding their pain. So I think that because I felt that, and I would see very clearly that those people were, and that was many people, were in denial, or they just weren't even aware the pain was buried so deep. And I wanted to try and figure that out, probably for the most part. Well, two reasons. One, I wanted to help remove that person's pain. And secondly, because I was feeling their pain and it was very uncomfortable, that was another strong motivating factor to want to remove the pain.
Interesting. And I don't need to jump into big miracles. I need to jump into the juiciness of this, if I may. What compelled you, because I know you had two books prior, one book prior, one book since.
But I had written that other, but you're correct though, I had written that other one before Big Miracles. It was only I published that afterwards, because it took me courage to publish that one. Scarlett's Confession.
Yes.
That one.
So
the naughty one.
The naughty one. Okay, so Scarlett's Confession, my friends, is a fantastic read, and we'll get into that. We can get into that shortly. But it is, I listened to it through your audiobook, and I loved that because I know you, and I felt that you were right there beside me. No doubt, I would have felt the same way anyway had I been reading the book. But I felt that it was a very spiritual book. Wherever you are at, it will meet you. And so it's in the realm of chick lit. Is that right? It's
chick lit. It's spirituality and sex and spirituality and sex.
It was fantastic.
But I mean, I think that's life. It's like the energy of creation and coming to terms with that. And a lot of the things are funny because Scarlett's search of spirituality at times is very unspiritual. And I think that's the thing, is that if someone to be spiritual does not mean they're going to be a saint. And life isn't like that. So I think it gives people some sort of feeling of relief, and to be able to let go of the heavy emotions and go, growing spiritually is a journey. And for example, you can't be spiritual 1 minute and go, oh yes, things are great, and then the second one doesn't get what one wants, to go, oh well, stuff this spirituality stuff. It just doesn't work. So there was really, and that actually, writing Scarlett's Confession came out of doing The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it was born out of that, because Artist's Way is very much about finding one's creativity. And that was a 12-week course. And I had set out to do that. You have to sign a declaration at the beginning, making the commitment to the journey, that spiritual journey. And that led to that. But because the Scarlett's Confession is so close to what my life was, I had to create many years of distance before releasing that book. And I think that needed to come after Big Miracles, because if that came first, do you get what I'm saying?
I totally get what you're saying. And having read them both, I know what you're saying. So what compelled you to write this book that changed my life, Big Miracles?
So before Big Miracles, I had been teaching a lot of psychic development and psychic development. When we hear the word psychic, especially from when I was living in Los Angeles, there's the we think neon sign, we think psychic, phone lines, gypsy rose, with the cards. We think Jane Seymour and Live and Let Die. It's that stereotypical thing. But I like to think, and then for people who are maybe who are very Christian, they go, oh, psychic, that's sort of that's not God's work, that's the work of the devil, which is absolutely, in my opinion, it's ridiculous, because I went to Church of England Christian schools. For me personally, I believe in all sort of spirit God is everywhere in a different version, and you know what it means to each person. So psychic is awareness. The way I see it, it is an extension of our senses, being able to see, hear, feel, know, smell, taste, and trust at that deep level. And so what happened was I had self-published Unleash the Psychic in You, and that came out of over 10 years of teaching workshops. And then as I progressed on my journey, I was making going through great spiritual growth and personal development. But there was more. There was another layer to go, because I was still going through challenges in my life with weight fluctuation, with, you know, finances up and down, making a lot of money, then making foolish choices around spending and business decisions. And so I had Big Miracles originally was just, I was coaching clients one-on-one with that certain format, where I started going, what has been working really well in my life? How do I extract those processes? And then after I'd been teaching it to 3 people for a while, where I was taking them through this intensive 90-day process, I then went, I'm going to do a group, and I did Big Miracle Breakthrough, and I taught that group, I think in the end it was 3 times. I took people through that 90-day intensive in a group setting. And then from there, I had the foundation to do the book. When I then started to explore the publishing opportunities, what I learned was the publishers, they said, this sounds great. How can you make this into a book? So they wanted something different from the same concept. And then I really enjoyed Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. I think sometimes people misconstrue Think and Grow Rich, and they think it's about, oh, well, you just think something and then you make a lot of money. Right. And rich is a very personal thing, you know, a rich life. It could be, and his chapter on the sixth sense is all about, you know, the intuition. And I thought, he's just touching the surface on this. I think some of the reasons he just touched on the surface were, at that point, he only knew a certain amount. And then also because this was not, intuition and mindfulness and spirituality, and these things were not mainstream yet. They weren't broadly accepted. So I think there were some limitations there for him. And I said, I want to carry on that work where he has touched upon the importance of intuition, which he said was the most important skill chapter out of the entire Think and Grow Rich. I went, I'm going to go really deep on that. And because I have been out there and woo-woo, and I've gone off around the world and done wild things and shamans and healers and looking for UFOs and all that sort of stuff, but I've worked in corporate finance, I was like, I need to do something that is practical spirituality. Unleash the Psychic in You is pretty practical, but I want something that is really accessible and that fits with the world we live in, because we do live in this world, in this paradigm. And I personally think it's important to follow the rules and the laws of wherever the land is that we live in, and live respectfully within it. That's a spiritual thing within itself, instead of saying, oh, well, I'm just going to go be this, you know, spiritual person, which really is not being very spiritual.
I think that I love all of what you said. I always do. I feel like I say that to you every time we speak. But the thing that really struck me in your book, which is why I give it as a welcome gift to those who coach with me, because it's just that, you know, magnificent. It's not an overstatement.
Thank you.
You said practical spirituality. I realized until I'd read your book, growing up in the church myself, never really feeling all that religious, but liking a lot of aspects of church, feeling very disconnected from other aspects of church. I stopped going when I was 18, and it wasn't until I started to turn my mind a little bit more, my mind and my heart more towards spirituality. I probably was around 40, so it's about 5 years ago. And I came upon not everyone, very well known Gabby Bernstein, and I really liked it. and I've told you this before, and I'm not me, and I hope this doesn't put you in an awkward position at all, but I really liked it. But I still felt the same disconnect between, there's something here, like I did with church, there's something here that I really, really like, but there's something still missing. And I read your book, Big Miracles, I was like, that was sort of it. It was that connection to spirit while still being practical in the world that we live in today. And it's not an either or, it's a beautiful integration of the two. And so I love that part about what it is that you bring in all that you do, not just Big Miracles, but in all the way that you show up and teach.
I think people are at different stages in their journey of spiritual awakening. And so Gabby Bernstein's books are fantastic for someone who has been very much, I would say, is waking up.
Right.
The early phases. A lot of people that maybe have been going through, maybe they've been caning it a bit in the, it's more, I feel, for the sort of the person who's been in the city or living within the, very much that their paradigm has been more around a materialistic life. She was in New York. I know I was in London. I did a lot of the same scene as her. I didn't do any of like the drug stuff. Like she was hardcore into drugs and very much, New York in some ways is even everything's like bigger, faster, harder than London. And so I think for someone that has been very much into, say, fashion or, more materialistic or been on that scene, it is her books are a great introduction. And even in the simplicity of that, there's phenomenal, she has phenomenal tools in there. And then for me, we're just different. We cover the same thing, but from different angles. I'm a Scorpio. For me, everything is about it, not just because I'm a Scorpio. I mean, I'm someone and that's where we resonate a lot with each other. I'm all about depth and going really, really deep. So I go more so like narrow and deep, whereas I feel that Gabby, and again, so it's not a comparison thing, but you're saying, the difference is she goes broader, just sort of broader, more, just sort of more broader in life. I like to get really right in there and then let's go deeper. And when you say, I don't think there's anywhere else to go. Yes, there is somewhere else to go.
Yes, there is. I will echo that. I will let everyone know that I have thankfully, although somewhat begrudgingly at times, been on the receiving end of the going deeper, and it's marvelous. That's just where the breakthroughs really happen. And the reason I wanted to bring Gabby up is because I know that some of my listeners are on that spiritual journey. And so I think that it's really, I wanted to make that distinction. So thank you for playing along with that. I wanted to make that distinction so they could understand, well, why would I want to perhaps read Big Miracles? And so I love the description, that it is that you offered, because
not either or. We always talk about this. It's a yes, and any topic that we're interested in. I know that I'll have multiple books, or I'll when I say multiple books, there's normally several people that because each person shows a different angle, maybe on the same general topic, but there's just something else. And it's not better or worse. I think it always comes down to, what does one's spirit, one's soul, what does one need specifically to grow to that next level?
Speaking of growing to the next level, there's something that you're doing right now in a Facebook group that I'd love to ask you a little bit about. I know some of what I'm going to ask, but I just want to explore it a bit more and share with my listeners. So it's called the Quickening. And so can you just give us just a high level insight or overview as to what the Quickening is and what inspired the Quickening?
Yes. So when I was first writing Big Miracles, I put in rule 2, be a spiritual vehicle. I go not deep, but I touch upon preparing for the quickening. And this was something that, oh, I thought I had turned the texts off on my phone. So sorry about that. So preparing for the quickening, I had written about that, gosh, I guess back in 2015, like when I first started writing about that, but it stemmed from back in 1998 when I was off on one of my spiritual adventures, and I had gone into an ancillary pyramid next to the Giza pyramid in Egypt. And I remember crouching down. It was a much smaller one, and there were these figures there with all these hieroglyphs on the wall, and I just got a very strong, the best way I could describe it is sort of like a download of information of what was coming, which is what's here now. At the time, it was referred to me as the age of light, and I feel like that age of light is very much as the computer age, and I was told we are going to go in a period where we enter the age of light and things move faster and faster and faster. And we've had many conversations about that in relationship to your book, Humanizing Leadership. So that from that, again, suddenly I went, oh my gosh, this thing back from 1998. Well, oh my gosh, that's quite a while ago. What is that? I'm trying to think, I'm doing the math in my head.
I know, back to the 90s. 22.
Okay, so 22 years ago. And that now we're in that now. So as all the COVID stuff struck, and I went, how can I be useful? How can I be of service? Because I had quite a few intuitions that something was coming for the past year. I didn't know it was going to be in this form like this. And so I went, okay, well, I'm going to put together this group based on the downloads, what I would call, so like the channel, like the information that I had come into my mind. And that basically is that we are in a global spiritual awakening, and I wanted to put the group together for other people who are actually quite advanced in their spiritual selves already, but they're just looking to really go into the deeper side of metaphysics. And the whole concept is, with the quickening, is that we experience these cosmic waves of energy. It's essentially energy. And when I say cosmic, I don't mean psychedelic or out there, but cosmic in terms of, when we feel the ups and downs of life, and we feel, we're feeling everyone's energy around us, especially if one is sensitive. So to be able to really explore the idea of the quickening mind, which I think in movies like A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, or what was it with Phenomena with John Travolta, those are more extreme examples. But I do feel that we have this brilliance within our mind. I do feel that we are in a period of rapid evolution right now. When Darwin always talked about evolution, we're definitely evolving, and it is that thing, adapt or die. Everyone right now in business is talking about pivoting, but really we need to and that is critical for business owners. But on a personal, on a personal level, I would say focus on adapting your whole being, and the deeper concept of, well, what does the quickening mean? You have to slow down, and then things will actually speed up, meaning things will go better for you. You won't be going against the current. You won't be experiencing massive resistance. So it can feel very, very counterintuitive because of how our culture is.
Yes.
And how it's more faster.
And in order to keep, so that in order to keep up, you have to go faster. So it is it's counterintuitive to recognize that slowing down is or pausing is the answer, and then secondly, then actually doing it, because that's not easy. One of the things that I took away from your book, the list is long certainly, but was the center ground connect. I repeat that all the time. Center ground connect. It's like this mantra in my head that I couldn't get rid of if I wanted, but I'm grateful for that fact.
That's
so can
good.
you tell us because I feel like it is good. So it worked. Can you share with us, because I feel like that's a very tactical sort of tool that someone can walk away with from this, understanding, yes, okay, so this pace, they're recognizing the quickening, whether they've called it that or not, this accelerated pace in this already fast-paced world. And so that concept of slowing down to speed up, is that where you would go? The center ground connect? That's where my head went. But I should have asked you, where does yours go?
I mean, that's absolutely, it's a foundation. It's a very strong foundation. So centering, in its simplest form, the purpose of centering is to really be with yourself and be aware. And when we're centered, we know what is right for us. We know why we want it. We're in tune. We're connected. When we are centered, we don't experience overwhelm or fear or chaos. So centering and practicing centering, because one could start to center and then feel off kilter, but one just keeps coming back to that. I'm going to center. And I believe in centering from the heart. One can center from the solar plexus, from the power center, or from the mind's eye to focus on one's vision, or from the crown to connect upwards. But really, ideally, the heart, one's heart center. And then ground. Well, if you ground before you center, or you connect before you ground, you might not connect to what is an optimal alignment. So centering is, yes, I'm in the right place. This feels right. Now I'm going to ground, meaning, again, we have to live physically in this world. I think that we're here on the earth. Some people in the more new age community talk about ascension and just leaving the planet. But I think there are so many gifts, even in the pain of life, where we go through loss, we go through transition, all these different things, that life is a school. It is a great opportunity. And why wish to graduate from it too soon when it is such a gift? And then connecting, once we feel I know who I am, and there's different levels of knowing who one is. And I know, in its simplest form, I know who I am. I know why I'm here. I know what my purpose is. I'm going to put down roots here. Sort of one of my favorite scenes that I always talk with Nick about is the movie Far and Away with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. And then they go and they get their flag in the ground, sort of, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
It's funny. Okay, where are you going to ground? Where are you going to put roots down? Where are you going to build your community? Where are your friends? And just finding that right alignment, and then connecting afterwards is the connection to energy, spirit, and also pure essence. And I believe that essence is bringing through one's highest self, the expression of one's highest self, as we go from, which I talk about in the quickening, right? Mm-hmm. Yourself to higher self, and then higher self. And sometimes, ultimately we're living all three of those expressions. And then there's expressions within expressions within expressions that are amplified, but really being able to, from that place, even if someone else is saying you're wrong, or let's say you don't have the evidence yet, which I talk about in Big Miracles, if you don't yet have the evidence of something that you're working on to keep going, there is this knowing, which is also referred to as claircognizance from the psychic senses, where you just know. It's like, stick with that thing. I'm in the right place. I'm taking the right action. So that is why rule 1, along with spirit, and that meditation of center ground connect is the foundation of building everything out from there. Otherwise one has a house of cards, and we don't want that.
We don't want that. I had that and mine fell to the ground, and I don't want anyone else to ever have to experience that. That's for sure. Something else that I was reminded of as you were sharing that, so thank you for sharing that, that piece about the center ground connect. I don't know if it's in your book or if it's just something you've continued to say to me over time, and I've continued to repeat it as well, as what's the next right step?
Yes, it is. Exactly. That's rule 7, take the right action. Okay. I'm pretty sure I have that as rule 7. I know, because I've got my book here.
It's rule 9. Rule 7 is accept responsibility.
There we go.
Rule 9
Thank you.
is
Yes,
take the right
action. And that's interesting, because when Big Miracles was written, we moved some of the rules around in the edits.
Well, yeah, I understand the editing. I'm starting to understand the editing process,
yes.
right? As I'm in the throes of it right
exactly.
now. Thankfully, with you guiding me.
And your book's going to be brilliant. Humanizing Leadership is going to be a very impactful book that helps many leaders and aspiring leaders around the world. You heard it here first.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So I don't want to go past this before we just spend a little bit more time. It sounds so obvious. What's the next right step? The power in this for me, and I hope this was your intention as you wrote the book, was that with Centigram Connect, I always then am able to get clear on the next. I can ask myself then, what's the next right step? And then it comes to me either in a feeling and in words in my head. Sometimes it's not necessarily right away, but relatively quickly it becomes evident what the next right step is. It helps just not only, the Centigram Connect has sort of cleared the noise and quieted my mind and my heart. And then that's allowed then clarity about action. That's my sense. How do you describe how that piece fits into the other elements of Big Miracles? What did you want readers to take away from that piece?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's exactly that. You're living it. So I think that what I've noticed myself from the point that I wrote Big Miracles, and then I've had space from it, and then when, let's say, for example, when I've gone and done an interview, or I've gone and then looked back at something, or say someone's reached out to me online about the book and they've shared something that's happened for them, and then I've gone and looked at that piece in the book and then gone, wow, it really does work. It does really work. I mean, I think that what I feel that in terms of taking the right action, sometimes to take a right action, I mean, part of the thing is that we take actions that this goes to rule 4, forgive mistakes. We take actions which we go, oh, that was the wrong action. But if one's doing one's best from the place one is at, then that was the right action to take. And if we don't know what we don't know the right question to ask. We just don't know certain information until we figure that out. So I think a lot of what holds people back, and I know what has definitely affected me in my life or slowed me down in a way, not where I meant to slow down, but where I've been paralyzed, is because I berated myself for making a certain decision and going, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That wasn't the right business decision to make. But that now I find that happens to me so rarely now that, gosh, and I'd say in the last year and a half in particular, that 95% of my decisions have been the right choice, whether it's been what I spend money on, what I buy, who I do business with. The decisions I make are the right decisions. So that's been amazing. And that's just, I think, because I'm much more, I really focus on living the rules from Big Miracles. So that has been very, very positive. It saves time in the long run.
And one of the rules to take responsibility, I think really helps. That certainly helped me with that as well. Would you say this is it's kind of like I don't know, it's not a muscle per se, but it's like a muscle, and the more that you exercise this muscle, so to speak, the easier it becomes to live in this fashion and to make choices from this place?
I mean, you're speaking, what I understand is you're speaking of intuition there. And intuition has many facets to it. And indeed, it is a muscle. in terms of taking responsibility, I mean, that's something that when we decide to take responsibility, suddenly things that we thought were paralyzing us or beyond our control, we see there is a solution, there is a way to create outcomes that we want for ourselves in our lives. That is absolutely vital. When we're not accepting responsibility, most typically we're moving into a state of blame, and blame creates anger and frustration. And then there's just this resistance that comes up where we can't.
Or in my case, putting your head in the sand, which is what I did as you helped me with my finances. And I wanted to mention this, if I may, just because it speaks to the 4 areas of responsibility you talk about. Again, I don't usually remember stuff from books like I've remembered your stuff. But do correct me if I happen to be wrong, because I'm known to misquote things. Relationships, health, finances, and career.
Yes.
Those are the 4 areas of responsibility that you reference in the book. And I just remember reading it and thought, okay, this makes sense. And that's one of the things that I really liked about it, because it all sort of made sense, but it is a level that's different than other things I've read. So with my finances, I mean, I've always been open with you. I've not been hiding anything, but as you and I worked together longer, more stuff comes out, right? You don't just like open the kimono the moment you meet someone saying this is everything, my whole self. So my finances became a little clearer, and you were lovely and you lovingly directed me to pull my head out of the sand, which I did. And I'm very grateful for it. I hope that I've said this to you. If I've not, here I am saying it now. I'm very grateful for you because of the timing of that. Not only just was it the right thing to do, and does it free you up and it created greater ease within me and just on a daily basis once I got rid of all of my debt. It frees up then creative space to be creative and live in more joy versus the opposite of that. But the timing of it, that it was just a handful of months before COVID.
Yes.
And I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, it's the impact of having taken care of that, having taken responsibility despite the fact that it was hard to do so, and having someone, you specifically, to guide me through that was just another miracle in my life. So I wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, so a lot of this, the sections within Big Miracles do address finances, and really I wanted to address those main areas of relationship, finances, career, and health, because many years ago when people would come to me for private readings, more on the like intuitive sort of side of things, and they say, oh, I feel so unspiritual, but I want to ask about money, or I want to talk about relationship. I say, that's not this is life. So that's absolutely why I felt it was important to address that. Also because I had to really figure those things out for myself and go, what is a formula, a way to be able to move through this? And then the other part of that is that, I mean, many people I've seen, especially living in Los Angeles from when I was there, it's one of those, right, they call it tinsel town, and you've got Hollywood. I think it probably has the highest percentage, one of the highest percentage of people in the world in debt. So because everyone's living far beyond, their spending before they earned. I mean, I used to have a crazy mental block for a number of years. I remember asking someone, how do you know if you're debting or not? Like, is using what's the difference between sort of cash and credit? And they would say, well, a credit card is it's future earnings, and until you have that money in the bank. Now, some people within the world of entrepreneurship and stuff, they'll take certain loans, but hopefully they do really good due diligence, or they're doing revenue management, and you can never predict. I mean, who, even with brilliant revenue management, who would have predicted with COVID now, where you've got the entire airline industry is going under, right? I mean, Warren Buffett just sold all of his shares in every single, everything he'd invested in airlines. And who would have thought Richard Branson would be asking for a bailout for Virgin Atlantic, people that have been in business for so many years. So I think that there's certain things that are, even if you plan well, they're beyond your control. So I think the thing of accepting responsibility for some people where they've lost their jobs, they have families, it is very, very, so challenging. Accepting responsibility in terms of where we could say, well, we're going to blame this government or that government, or why weren't these things in place, or restrictions being lifted sooner, or they shouldn't be lifted. Everyone's got a different point of view. Accepting responsibility for, this is where I'm at, this is what my bank balance is right now, these are my, this is the job or the business that I have, this is the family that I have, these are the things that I chose to, whatever those decisions are, and just go, I got to accept responsibility for all of it. Because if we start trying to blame someone else or point the finger, that puts one into a paralysis. I think for anyone that is in debt, and there's a number of people that I know out there, again, their lives on the surface, we'll see their Facebook or their social, oh, my business is doing great. I've seen it where people are saying, yeah, I just did, 10 million this year, but then they're $1 million in debt. So I think debt is very much or around money is an emotional thing. And I think that when we accept responsibility for all of our emotions, that is where then there is a clarity that comes in. And that's when the intuitive guidance comes of take this step, or, to figure things, how to do things in a right way. And what's right for me and what's right for you is going to be different for someone else. It's different for each one of us. But I do believe that, that a number of people saw the collapse that was coming. It was interesting. There was a book by Robert Kiyosaki that he had published last year, but he was writing that at a pace which was, there's a graph in it that had shown from the Great Depression and then from the economic collapse before, and he said there's even a much bigger crash coming. And I'd shared that book with a couple of people, and they said to me, oh, this book's stupid, but he's absolutely spot on. Right. So there's certain things where numbers and that predict the future, but at the end of the day, predictions are like, oh, well, now it's a mess. I think this comes back to, we need to start with the core of spirituality. And when I go, oh my gosh, how can I really help? It's just me. I just think I'm going to help one person at a time. And I think that's the beauty of books, right? Is that we can reach many people with our message from our message from the lessons that we've learned. Absolutely.
With all of the success that you've achieved in your life, what accomplishment are you most proud of?
Absolutely, by far, having my son Dominic and being married to Nick. Those are my greatest accomplishments. So
I love that.
Marriage, son, and then my books are like my children.
Yeah. We've talked about that a little bit before too. I'm joking with a few friends of mine that I feel like I'm 45 weeks pregnant. And for those of you who've never been pregnant, a full pregnancy is 40 weeks.
It really is that. And then I would say also from doing my show, Life Stories. I mean, I've had other TV shows before. I created a show in the UK that ended up being turned into 2 whole channels called Psychic Interactive. It was a really cheesy show, but it was before text messaging or was even in the United States. And so that there was that, but really I'd say doing Life Stories with EverTalk TV. So I filmed with EverTalk and they did all the production side for me. And then now that's having that deal recently with Binge Networks and being on 90+ smart TV networks has pretty cool to have that show out there.
It really is. It really is. And congratulations to you on that. Did you have a favorite guest? That might not be nice to ask. You can pass on that question.
Yes, I mean, it's different. I will tell you, I love interviewing B. Howard. He's just so just magical, awesome. He has this most magical energy. And so he pops into my mind. I loved interviewing Amberly Largo, who wrote True Grit and Grace, because I mean, she was in the hit and run car accident, and she's the most, I mean, having gone through all those surgeries and being left for dead, and she's one of the most positive people I know. She's incredible. So it was a delight interviewing her. Tracy Bregman, who stars in The Young and the Restless. Yeah. And she came on the show right when her house had just burned down from the Malibu fires. So it was amazing to have her on and sharing from, you know, she's in the core of like Hollywood. She's so glamorous and beautiful, and just to hear her, like, what's important to her. And it was out of her entire house burning down, all that was left was this Buddha, and I think one of a photo as well of her father. I mean, that's where I go, wow, spirit moves and works in mysterious ways.
Absolutely. I think the final question I have, I think it's my final question. What do you think the world needs more of?
More love, by far. Love. Because it comes back to, and this is where we're very much in alignment, and what you're doing with in a different way, right? Where you're teaching about the heartbeat in a robotic world through humanizing leadership. I feel like the heart is a connection, is an extension or a way for us to really embody more of our spiritual essence and our spirit, our spiritual self. And you know, when we look at a lot of the problems in the world, it comes down to who we are and how we show up. And you know, I've been mean and done terrible behavior at times in my life. Nothing, you know, really bad, but I've just been, you know, probably just been mean or thoughtless and selfish and narcissistic at points in my years when I wasn't aware. And I just feel if we can just start off with love, and love shows up in different forms. And part of love is forgiveness as well. Easier said than done. Yes. But with more love, I believe that we really can have a bright, sustainable future. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on.
I love that. And so this one isn't really a question, although it sort of is. Others who want to learn more about you, who want to get their hands on your book, who want to understand how they can do what I do with you and access you through coaching and other services that you offer, how can people find you?
The best way, thank you, Louise. The best way for people to connect with me would be through joannagarzilli.com, through my website. And so there's a contact form on there, and one can see the different ways of working with me. Also through my social media at Joanna Garzilli, via direct message.
Super. So there we go. Reach out to Joanna. She, as I mentioned many a time, and to echo what I've already said today, truly has changed my life. And so if you do have any questions about Joanna, I'm happy to share all the things. So please reach out to me. I'd be happy to share. Joanna, thank you is just not enough for your time today and for what it is that you've been in my life, but that's all I've got. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing yourself with all of us today.
Thank you, Louise. Amazing. As you know, I've done national TV and many interviews, and I have absolutely, this is in my top ones for sure, right up
Many
there
thanks.
With the national TV. So thank you.
Many thanks. And of course, also a big shout out and thank you to all of you, my loyal listeners, and remind you that information about the show and my guests can be found at louiseatreed.com. Also, as always, a big shout out to my producer, who this show would not happen without, Cameron Steele at Contact Talk Radio Network. If you've been inspired by today's guest and are ready to level up in your own life, contact me through my website and let's get growing. Until next week, I'm Louise H. Reed, wishing all of you a brave, bold, and happy day. Goodbye, my friends.